Hello my makeup loving friends. Today it is another makeup and murder. I'm using quite a few new products to me. I have the P. Louise base in 02, the Jouer Cosmetics foundation in the shade Ivory. I have the Juvia's Place Wahala palette, the Kaleidos Duo blusher, the Primark highlighter, and the Kaleidos liquid lip. So, in addition to us talking makeup and murder, which by the way we're talking about Ed Gein today, who was known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul, I am also running a giveaway on my channel with some nice little products, little makeup products. So watch till the end. I will tell you how it is that you can enter this competition. As per usual, I want to offer a disclaimer. I do talk about a killer, a murder, and if that's in any way triggering to you, please don't watch this video. It's not for you. I don't want to upset you. That is not the purpose of these videos. But if that sounds like something that you're interested in and want to see how it is that I created this fabulous look, super simple, then keep on watching the rest of the video, where I hopefully won't trip over my words. We'll see. So I've already primed my eyelids using the P. Louise in the shade 02, which is Rumour, which was sent on to me by, my mind can't grasp it, my lovely subscriber and friend Cheryl. I hugely appreciate it. I've never tried P. Louise before, so that was fun. And I am using the Juvia's Place Wahala palette, which myself and my friend Nikita bought. Nikita hasn't used it yet on her channel because she's very busy being pregnant. However, somebody I know from my Sexy Sausage group, not my group, but the group that I am in, Callum from Cal's World, has actually used it and reviewed it. I haven't watched the review yet because I didn't want it to confuse me. But I'm going to link his channel down below. But let's just get straight into it. I won't be really kind of showing you necessarily what it is that I'm doing. It's a chatty makeup and murder, as it is. But I'll show you vaguely what it is that I'm doing. Okay, so today we are talking about Ed Gein, who is also rather affectionately known as the Butcher of Plainfield. So let's start off first with Plainfield. What is that? Where is that? What's going on? I wouldn't blame you if you'd never heard of it. Plainfield is what can only be described as a very sleepy town in Wisconsin. At the time of Ed Gein's capture, it was essentially what you would classify as a one-horse town. It was very quiet. There were, I believe, 2 restaurants. There was a grocery store and a hardware store. There really wasn't a lot going on there at the time. Like it was quiet. So just when all of this went down, for all of the places for it to happen, Plainfield, which I mean, plain is in the name, you wouldn't have expected it to kind of happen. It was like the most quintessentially rural American town at the time, 1950s, when all of this went down. So it sent absolutely shockwaves through America when this happened, which is, I think, part of why he is so notorious to this day and why his crimes have influenced so much of even pop culture to this day. So Ed Gein, his parents were married in the late 1800s, and his mother was a devout Christian. Reed, utterly maniacally obsessed with the religion. She saw sin where there was not sin. She was a very dominant figure in the household, and her husband was an alcoholic. Now, they lived in the town of Plainfield and they owned a grocery store. So they were pretty much in the thick of everything in Plainfield, and they had their first son at the end of the 1800s. His name was Henry. Now, Augusta was not a fan of human beings as far as she was concerned. They were vessels for evil, and you know, people were bad, but she was particularly not fond of women, which is funny because it's like, you know, you're a woman, right? The self-loathing must have been real. But despite this, she really quite wanted to have a girl. So she was quite disappointed when her first child, Henry, was a boy. So when she fell pregnant with her second child, she was really hoping for a girl. Of course, she didn't get that. She got Ed instead, which rhymes. So this is important because actually there are rumours that when he was younger, she used to dress him up as a girl. But of course we can't really verify that because none of his family are around to prove or disprove that. But I think that's interesting, and it may actually play into some of his crimes later on. So they grew up in Plainfield. She ruled with an absolute iron thumb. She would not allow them to have friends. She, again, like I said, viewed other people as being a smidgen problematic. So they were forbidden from having friends. So what little social contact they had was in school. Ed was seen as being a very strange child. Like, he didn't have typical social skills. Apparently he used to just randomly start laughing in the middle of class for like no apparent reason. People viewed him as being not like intellectually disabled, but that he was a little bit slow, and that ultimately he was no harm to people. So he had this very strict and overbearing mother, but he utterly adored her. Like, he was obsessed with Mother Dearest. That's an important phrase. Yeah, it's fading out a little bit, but I think that could be just the way that I'm blending it. Tis grand. So yes, he had a very overbearing relationship with his mother. She would read a lot of Bible verses to them, particularly from the Old Testament, which, if you aren't familiar with that, it's very much fire and brimstone, you know, death comes to us all, we're all very bad, that sort of thing. You know, it seemed to kind of reverberate with Augusta. She really enjoyed that. Now, she, of course, thought that human beings, not good, can't be around them, and she particularly obviously didn't want the boys to have any friends. So one of the ways that she controlled that was actually she insisted that they sell the grocery store which they owned and move out into the countryside. So Ed's father, being rather weak-willed and obviously an alcoholic, he didn't have a huge amount of control over what was going on. Whatever Augusta said went. Just going into the shade again. So he kind of went with it, and they sold the grocery store, and with the proceeds of that they bought a farm outside of Plainfield, very much on the edges of the town, out of anyone's way, and they had 200 acres of farmland, and from there they became very much a farming family. So they very much kept to themselves. It was all essentially a family thing. Augusta was going around basically saying women are bad, people are bad, but particularly women. They're very, very, very bad. Don't go near them. Eventually, Ed's father died of, I believe it was a heart attack on I believe it was April Fool's Day of all days. And that left Ed and Henry to the clutches of Augusta. Now, however bizarre she was during the life of her husband, her rule over the boys, or the men at that point, really tightened, and she became even more tyrannical and Bible bashing, essentially. Now, Ed very much went with whatever mother said. As far as he was concerned, she could do no wrong. She was the pinnacle of humanity, and they were lucky to have her. Now, Henry, on the other hand, the eldest, was far more dubious about mother. He questioned her, he rebelled, he had his own mind, he did his own thing. So when he started to see a divorcee, Augusta was not happy, and again she started in on the whole, hell, fire, brimstone, you're going to hell, this is very bad. Now, most siblings would side with each other and would have each other's back. However, when Henry went to Ed to look for his support, Ed turned his back and very much sided with his mother. This, of course, made things very, very tense on the farm because they were still trying to run 200 acres worth of land. No mean feat, by the way. One day, a fire broke out outside on the land, which is odd. Now, they said that it was that they were trying to do something with the land. Sometimes you will burn off crops, not crops, but like weeds. And they said that that was what they had started doing. And that the smoke took over and that Ed couldn't see Henry anymore. So instead of looking for him, he just went to find a local group, essentially, and kind of said, hey, I can't find Henry, you need to help me look for them. And he brought them back to the farm and led them pretty much straight away to Henry's body. Suspicious? You would think so. However, again, we are in Plainfield, and this little place had never been shaken by anything like that to date. So they never thought to think, I wonder if there's any foul play happening here. Even though apparently some of the people who had turned up and saw Henry's body thought that it looked a smidge suspicious, just a smidgen. So his cause of death actually got written down as smoke inhalation, but some people do wonder if that was potentially Ed's first victim, but we don't really know this. Now, shortly after Henry's death, Augusta suffered a stroke and was pretty much stuck to the house, so it fell upon Ed to take care of his mother. So he now had his mum all to himself, and this was essentially what he had been looking for all along, just to be attached to her as much as possible. So he did everything for her, and he became even more kind of a recluse. Now, at this time, nobody really thought much of Ed. They thought he was a little bit odd, a little bit quirky. He worked a lot in Plainfield as a handyman, and he was actually known as being very professional in the sense that if he was asked to do something, he would do it to the absolute best of his abilities, and you would get amazing value for money. So in addition to being a handyman, he would also do things like babysit. When you hear about what it is that he did, you're kind of like, oh my God, can you imagine ever being babysat by somebody like that? It is pretty like mind-blowing. So he had been left with his mother, and everything was going, as far as he was concerned, very well. He was hanging out with mum all the time, really getting some quality time on in there. Just going into this shade now. However, Augusta ultimately succumbed to illness and passed away. To say that Ed was devastated is essentially an understatement. You have to understand that this woman was his world. As far as he was concerned, she was the pinnacle of everything that was good in his life, and she was gone now, and all other human beings were a bit rubbish, quite frankly. And it's kind of considered then that he fell into what can only be considered as a deep psychosis. So he was left all alone. He had absolutely no social skills. He didn't have any friends. So he started to turn an awful lot to what was popular at the time, strangely, was a lot of horror comics. So he started to read some very macabre literature. He became very interested in the Nazi trials and the atrocities of the war, because this was the 1950s. So a lot more information was coming out in terms of like what the Nazis had done to the Jews in the concentration camps, which obviously not good. And I do wonder if he had read or heard about one particular woman who was a Nazi. She was really creepy. She was very jealous of women she viewed as being more attractive than her, and she would have their breasts cut off, and she would flay their skin and make it into things like leather-bound books or lamps. She was a scary, scary woman. This is an important point because I do wonder if he read that and maybe that inspired him, which could you not be inspired by like a nice painting or something instead? So he started reading all of these particular things, but obviously he was missing company. So, you know, instead of like going out and maybe going to a local bar and getting to know people, he instead decided that he would try and recreate his mum, which, you know, scary. And to do this, he figured he needed sort of models to do this. So he took to grave robbing. You know the story is getting interesting when you are talking about grave robbing. I am going to put on a bit of liner, some mascara and lashes. I'm going to do that off camera and put on some primer because quite frankly, you don't need to see me struggling with lashes. And we'll get back into chatting on what it was that he did when he started grave robbing, because the story does not get much better from there. Okay, lashes and mascara on. Let's get back into it. I'm just going to do some eyeliner on the waterline. So, with his mother now dead, she died, I believe it was December 1945. Ed really descended into madness. So he was living all by himself on 200 acres worth of land. And, I mean, it's kind of clear he had a complete and utter psychotic break. He let the house go to absolute squalor. I mean, there was nobody there, so I suppose why bother? He did lock off his mother's room, though, and kept it in pristine condition, just as she had left it, essentially. But obviously he grew lonely, and as you do, I suppose you go to the local graveyard and dig up people. That was his way of, I suppose, dealing with this. So it's unclear as to how many graves he ended up disturbing. He kind of said he ended up doing it in a sort of a fugue state, but he apparently used to look at obituaries and see whether or not the dearly departed suited what he wanted, because he primarily went for females. I don't think he had any males, even though I am personally kind of semi-convinced that his first ever victim probably was his brother Henry. So he started to unearth these people, and I mean, it's pretty gruesome. Like, but we're talking about a man who clearly was not compos mentis. So, oh God, he obviously missed his mother, as you would, particularly when she was such an overbearing influence on his life. And he began to take these corpses that were relatively fresh, I suppose is the word that we're using here, and dress them up as his mother and have like conversations with them. If this sounds familiar to you, it you know, there's probably a reason for that. I have the Jouer Foundation in the shade Ivory, which again was gifted to me by Cheryl. Wildly appreciate that. So he started to dress them up, and when they were no longer serving their purpose, he did other things with them, which I will get back to later because it's super gross, you know. Again, you know, I'm sure I said this at the beginning, but do not continue if you are in any way of a squeamish disposition. This is not for you. So he continued to grave rob. He was reading a lot of kind of pulp fiction at the time that was kind of dark and kind of morbid. Not to say that necessarily caused him to do this. I think there was a very specific set of circumstances, you know, the overbearing mother and like lack of social skills, along with, I think, you know, a lot of other issues that were probably just genetic, but it's hard to tell. But definitely he had a psychotic break. Like, that's pretty evident when you're looking at it. So he continued to rob graves, but obviously that came to a point where that was no longer serving its purpose anymore. And one day he walked into a bar, which sounds like it's the beginning of a joke, but it's not, unfortunately. It's a lot more sinister than that. He walked into a bar that was owned by Mrs. Mary Hogan. Now, Mary was actually known locally as Bloody Mary. She was incredibly charismatic. She could give as good as she got. She had a very wild sense of humour. Some said that she had a very like dirty mind, to which I'm like, I got you, Mary. You were my kind of woman. So he walked into this bar, and there stood Mary, who, by the way, bore a striking resemblance to his mother. So it must have come as quite a shock when this foul-mouthed woman began speaking to him. It must have just been such a juxtaposition that there was this woman who looked so much like his mother, who, as far as he was concerned, was a complete and utter angel, and there was Mary swearing her head off. So it kind of confirmed what his mother had always said about, you know, women are sinners and they're bad and they're this and they're that. Now, Mary then went missing, never to be seen again, sort of. And that was in 1954. I'm just looking for my concealer. There we go. I look very pale. We clearly have to blend this out a little bit more. Be grand. You're going to go down here. You're going to work out. It's going to be fun. Jeez, I look very, very pale. Also, incidentally, Ed was known as the Ghoul of Plainfield. I could look like a ghoul right now. But it's fine. Once we introduce bronzer and stuff, you know, I'll start to look like a human again. It's going to be a whole thing. Anyways, she went missing. And of course, we're talking about Plainfield, Wisconsin. Nothing bad ever happened there. Like, it was a one-horse town. It was quiet, unassuming. So, of course, it set villagers and the townsfolk to talking, and lots of speculation about what had happened. So, of course, there were the constant questions and rhetorical questions, they thought, of, gosh, where on earth could she be? What could have happened to her? And on several occasions, people were having this particular conversation, and Ed said, oh, she's at my house. And everyone laughed it off. That's how he was seen. They didn't see him as a threat. They saw him as being very odd. And obviously, again, at that time, kind of people weren't primed to think of each other as threats in that particular way. So I personally find that really, really interesting, that he obviously, I mean, that's evidence straight away that he really wasn't with it when he was kind of inadvertently confessing to the crimes. So that was in 1954. Now, again, we're not really sure as to how many people he killed, because he was grave robbing. So, you know, we know that Mary was his first kill, and I will come back to that in a little bit. I know my narrative is a little bit jumbled, but look, we'll get there. Yeah, that'll do. So, he proceeded to go along his strange and, I guess, merry way. I guess that's what we're saying. And the year 1957 hopped up. He was still like grave robbing, and he had killed Mary at this point. And it came to deer hunting season. This is relevant, I promise. Because this is a point at which a lot of people in Wisconsin would kind of leave their homes to go out into the wilds to go hunting. So the town ended up being fairly deserted. So it was left to Bernice Warden to run her hardware shop essentially by herself. Now, she was a very capable and smart woman, so, you know, nobody would have really thought much of it. Her son, I believe his name was John, I could be wrong, so, you know, correct me if that's the case. He was in law enforcement in another town. This is important. He had noticed when he had visited his mother before that Ed Gein had been kind of hanging around, being a little bit odd. But that's Ed for you. You know, he was known to be a little bit unusual. So most people wouldn't have thought much of it, but Bernice's son thought it was pretty weird. Now, during the time of the deer hunting, people noticed that Bernice's store wasn't active, and they were like, what on earth is going on? Maybe she's gone off to do this. It was very unusual, but, you know, they didn't really think too much of it. However, it was when Bernice's son came around and realised that she wasn't there, that an alarm essentially was rung of, something is not quite right here. So he went into the shop and he discovered that there was a trail of blood. Let's be real, not exactly what you want to see when your mum is missing. And he examined the books, because back then everything was entered into books. And the last name on the purchases was, you guessed it, Ed Gein. Now, given his odd behaviour, he had been coming in, by the way, pricing or trying to see what the price of antifreeze was. Bernice's son's suspicions were straight away raised, and he alerted the authorities and said, you need to check this out. So they went out to Ed's house. In the meantime, by the way, they had apprehended Ed. He wasn't actually out at the house, and he was put into their teeny tiny little county jail. I have this Kaleidos Lo-Fi Duo blusher in rose, which was gifted to me by the beautiful Missa from Make Me Up Missa. I'm going to use that in a minute, but I'm going to do my brows first. I always forget to do my brows. Anyways, they went out to this big sprawling farm, and they went to try to get into the house, but of course it was locked, they couldn't get in. So they decided to start kind of wandering around on the outside premises, and they went into a barn. Now, it was late enough and it was quite dark, and I mean, Ed didn't really take care of the general premises, so there were no lights, etc. set up. So when they went into the barn, they had to rely on their flashlights. The scene was held up by Art Schlee, who was the head sheriff at the time. So he and his men went in there and they started to look around in the pitch black. So all they had was their flashlights. And it was then, as they were going through the barn, that Art felt something slide or brush past his shoulder. When he diverted his flashlight to it, he saw a body hanging from the ceiling, held by its ankles. It was, unfortunately, Bernice Warden's body. It had been defiled, I suppose is the way to say it, and had been kind of sliced across in an attempt to, I suppose, disembowel, as you do. I guess, like, it's a strange thing. You can only imagine how horrific that would have been. Now, some people state that Art was so disgusted by what he had found that when he got Ed, he beat his head against the wall until he confessed. Now, once they had found this, obviously it opened up a whole ton of investigation. They had to try and figure out exactly what it was that was going on, what else was there in the house. So remember how I said that I mean, it's so gross, that he had been grave robbing, and when he was done with the bodies, he did other things. Well, when they went into the kitchen, they found that there were some remains of Bernice on the stove. So there are some that think that he may have cannibalized some of the remains, but we're not 100% certain on that. There's not a huge amount of evidence on that. He had used some of the skulls of these women. I'm going to put some blush on now to... No, actually, no, I won't put blush on. I'm just going to brush off some of the excess of the powder. So he had used the remains of these women to decorate his house. Yeah, that's right. To decorate. You heard me right. To decorate his house. So I'm just going to use my number 7 powder now. Yeah, he decided that he was going to decorate his house with their remains. So remember how I was talking about the Nazi female guard, and she was using women's skin to make like lampshades and stuff? Ed did the same thing. I guess repurpose, recycling. I don't know. Don't think that's what the Green Movement had in mind, but I guess to each their own. They found that he had made furniture out of remains. He had left skulls on the posters of the bed. He had sawn off skulls and had made them into soup bowls. They looked under his bed and they found a bag of noses. I mean, it was pretty brutal. You can only imagine, having come across that scene, what that would be like. And actually, Archie, who was, like I said, heading the investigation, he died a couple of months later, and some people reckon that it was due to the trauma that he witnessed being there. I'm just going to go into this shade, because this shade is actually, it's very, very vibrant, and I don't think I can get away with it with this particular foundation. I'm putting my blush on first, and then I'll put on some bronzer. Oh, hello. Very pigmented. Thank you, Missa. You're a doll. I mean, the atrocities continue. They also found... I mean, it's so weird. They found a box of vulva. You heard me right. Vulva. Female genitals. Some of which were from women as young as 15, so in their teens. Now, it's unclear as to whether or not these were murder victims or if these were some of the corpses that he had grave robbed. We really don't know. Like, we really genuinely don't know what his actual kill count was. That's really nice. I like that as a blush. Will I put a little bit of the shimmer on? Just a little bit. Like, you know. Yeah, that's grand. So... they were finding all of these things. Now, up until this point, they still didn't know what had happened to Mary. It was at this point that one of the investigators... This is the problem with being blind, I just can't see things. There we go. Gotta do my bronzer now. It was at this point that one of the investigators found a bag, and he saw hair in it. You would think that, you know, if you saw hair in a house where that sort of thing was going on, you might kind of not have an immediate instinct to put your hand in and pull it out. But that's what he did, and he pulled out Mary Hogan's face. Yeah. If this is all sounding a little bit familiar, this is because a lot of this inspires modern horror films, so, you know, that's probably where you're getting a little bit of deja vu from. They also found what they called a mammary vest. So he had taken the flesh of women and made it into a vest, including some heavy breasts. Because I suppose if you're going to do it, go big or go home, you know. I'm sorry, my humour is a little bit dark. But yeah, so they found all of these things. It turns out that part of what he had been doing was taking Mary Hogan's face, putting it on, using the mammary vest, and just wandering around and pretended to be his mother. Yeah, again, does it sound familiar? Probably does. If you have seen the film Psycho, Norman Bates, that was directly inspired by this, which I will get back to in a little bit. So obviously this shook people to their core. Ed quickly confessed. He gave them all of the information. He just asked for apple pie with a slice of cheese on top, which I think is possibly one of the most grotesque parts of all of this. And yeah, he told them everything that they needed to know to get a conviction. So he was obviously trialed. This was a huge case at the time. Like, this was the 1950s. People had just come out of the war. By the way, I'm using this highlighter that I bought from Penny's the other day. It was part of my haul. I'm going to link that video down below if you haven't seen it already. I also got this hoodie there. Yeah, so thus began the trial. And they eventually obviously found him insane, and he was committed to a psychiatric ward. But America's attention had been captured. His house was photographed and put in Times magazine, Life magazine. Like, he was infamous. Thus began, I suppose, the Americans' idea of an anti-hero. Like, it's pretty weird. Oh, I have most of my makeup done now, pretty much. I'm just going to use some setting spray. The next one. I can't see what I'm doing. So obviously he was put into a psychiatric ward. Now, his infamy would have eventually gone over time. You know, people would have stopped talking about it. But there was a reporter there at the time. Was it Rochter or Rochler? I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. And he went on to write the book Psycho, which shortly after was made into a film by Alfred Hitchcock. And of course, you know, when we look at that film, there are huge parallels between the character of Norman Bates and Ed Gein. That was not a coincidence. He was directly inspired by Ed Gein at the time. I'm looking very pale on camera, but it's interesting because in reality, this is a perfect shade for me. Very strange. The camera lies. Like, I'm just saying, the camera lies. So I have a lip liner that I got in Penny's and or Primark, I suppose, depending upon whatever you want to call it, and it's called Scarlet. So he had been convicted. Weirdly, the people of Plainfield kind of reacted to this in a very specific way. This is where, you know, we would say that Freud was kind of right in terms of defense mechanisms. I talked a little bit about that in one of my last videos, which was I'm a psychologist, ask me anything. And they developed a very dark sense of humour. They called it Gein humour. So they developed a series of jokes such as, what is Ed's favourite dessert? Ladyfingers. You know, and things like that. So it was their way of kind of coping with the atrocities that had been perpetrated on them at the time. Tourists were still coming to check out, you know, Ed's house of horrors. And actually his sedan, which had been used to essentially ferry the bodies from the cemetery, etc., actually ended up being shown at shows, which is so bizarre. But eventually his house actually burnt down, and they still don't know what caused it. What was the reason? Was it arson? There is no confirmed information on what exactly caused the fire. But when he was told about this in the psychiatric unit, he just said, well, it's better off really, isn't it? They had no issues with him in the psychiatric unit. Apparently he was very docile, very pleasant to be around, apparently. His crimes, of course, inspired Leatherface from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and obviously also inspired Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. He died then in the 1980s from liver cancer, and thus died one of the more infamous serial killers within American history. I'm just going to do my lips very, very quickly and we'll chat about the giveaway, etc. So I finished the look off by just like taking my hair down, doing the fringe, and I used this lip gloss, again gifted to me by Missa. Thank you! It is the Kaleidos liquid lip. I'm going to zoom you in on the eyes now so you can see exactly what it is that I did with my weird eyeballs. So this is the look. It reminds me a little bit of the one that I did with the Nabla Cutie palette. I do like it though. It was very easy to use. I didn't really have to do a huge amount with it. I'll take the glasses off so you can see it a bit better. So that was our Makeup and Murder talking about Ed Gein. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, as much as you can enjoy talking about a depraved killer. But I know some of you guys are as dark and twisty as me, so it's fine. I think the next one I'll do is probably Aileen Wormos, because I've had a few people request that, so I'll be doing some research on that. That's why it takes me a little while to do these things, because I have to research into them. I think we can kind of agree when we're looking at Ed Gein, there was a lot of issues, particularly in terms of mum and the way that she raised him and his lack of social skills, etc. But that being said, his crimes were pretty depraved and yeah, very creepy. Yeah. So this is the part where I'm telling you guys about a giveaway that I'm doing on my channel. It's not that long ago since I did a giveaway, which was weirdly meant to be for my 100, so like for me hitting 100 subscribers, but it took so long to get here that I had like 200 and something at the time. This is to celebrate the fact that by the time that this goes up, I'll have had over 20,000 views, because as I'm putting it up, the last I looked, I had like 19,957 views, so I'm very close. So this is celebrating 20k views. Woohoo! And considering I only joined YouTube a little over a year ago, I'm really darn pleased with that. I'm also over 2,400 watch hours in, which if you're not into YouTube, it doesn't sound like it's a big deal. But to get monetized, you have to have 4,000 watch hours and have 1,000 subscribers. I have 370 something at the moment, which is amazing, but I always want more. So to thank you guys for helping me out with that, all of your comments, your likes, subscribing is such a big deal to me. Like, I really appreciate it. So I have a little box of goodies here, including some, well, one of the things I used on today's video. So firstly, I have 2 K Rose Bee sponges. They're from a little indie brand in the UK. They're really nice, they're really soft, they're very squidgy. Hurrah! I used this today because I bought an extra one to put into the giveaway. This is the one that Missa got me. It is the Kaleidos Lo-Fi Duo Blusher in Rose. So it's the exact same one. I also have the Diamond Dasher highlighter, Diamond Dasher highlighter, which I have my own one of. Again, this was given to me by Missa, so I will show you guys what that looks like. So it's a nice kind of a peachy toned blush. That is up for grabs. This is all like a bundle of things together, just FYI. So we have sponges, we have blush, we have highlight, we have a Coloured Rain Power Duo in Damage Control. So that is what that one looks like. It's a little blush and highlight duo. And I have 2 more Coloured Rain products, including a lipstick in the shade Foxy Lady, and I will open that now just to show you guys what it looks like. Don't worry, I'm not using it. Ugh. This is the little component. I hope you guys don't mind me touching it. And it's a nice deep dark red, kind of a little bit mauvey. So that's one of the lipsticks. And I'm going to put you back in so you can be safe. And one more lipstick, which was the Coloured Rain Power Matte Classic Lipstick in Implicated. And again, I'm going to just show you guys what it looks like. So it looks like this. And again, it's a nice berry shade. So those are all the things that are up for grabs in this giveaway. So How is it that you can potentially win? You of course have to be over the age of 18 to not be subscribed, to be entered. Just putting these back into the box so I don't like end up mixing them up with my own makeup, because that's the sort of thing I would do. You have to be over the age of 18. It is an international competition, so irrespective of where you are, I know I have some viewers in New Zealand and America. I think I have one in France. It's very weird. I'm like, what are you doing? Very much appreciated. It is open internationally. You have to be subscribed. So please make sure that you have set your account to show me who you're subscribed to. I'll leave details down below in like a pinned comment as to how you can do that. That's super, super important. Like and comment on this video. I will contact you via this video, i.e. I will reply to your comment letting you know that you've won, and you can give me your details as to how you want to be contacted, like is it via email, Instagram, etc., because I know that not everyone has Instagram. So you'll get one entry if you like, comment and subscribe on this video. However, you can get an extra 4 entries like I did with my last giveaway. So all you have to do is like and comment under the last 4 videos that I have put on this channel. I'm going to link them down below in the description box. This will be running for 2 weeks. So, oh my gosh, this is where I like need to have thought of the dates. I will put down below as to what the closing date actually is, and it should be at midnight. I will do what I did last time and put the names into a spreadsheet and have a random number generator pick out the person, and they will win this. So that is it. Do please like, comment and subscribe on my videos in general. It's a huge thing, because when you like, comment and subscribe onto something, it basically lets the algorithm know that my videos are worth watching, and it'll suggest me as a recommended video to other people, which is huge. I would love that. Do please share, because sharing is caring, unless of course it's an STD, in which case, you know, wrap it up, don't be gross. But that is it. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.